Hey, Art 385. So we are here going to learn about tabs today. I can remember I worked at Kinko's, which is now FedEx, way back in like 1993. And I remember sitting down next to the other people who had worked there a little longer. I had been using PageMaker at Boise High School for yearbook. I thought I knew everything. Sat down, and one of the first things I got to typeset was a resume. And I started hitting the spacebar to indent text and line it up. And my two coworkers looked completely appalled. They freaked out. They said, "Ryan, what in the heck are you doing? That's not how you set tabs." I was like, "What are tabs? I can hit the tab key." I'm like, "But that does the same thing as the space key." And they said, "Oh, you're such a fool." So thus began my journey learning tabs. I truly believe it's helped my career in a lot of ways. Tabs will allow you to organize information in your designs, allows you to avoid the hassle of trying to line things up with the spacebar, which just doesn't work and only causes headaches. And in general, tabs and by association, indents and style sheets, all of those three things combined will help you make longer form publications, or even if you're just doing a poster or something informational, make it look a lot better, just make it a lot smoother process for you. So I wanted to jump right in and show you something from the real world that was just brought to my attention. A friend of mine received this calendar over email. And I'm sure on screen in Microsoft Word on a computer, it looked okay. But I can tell just by looking at it that this person typeset this by hitting the space key. And no fault of their own, that's a very natural instinct. But since we're here in advanced typography, I thought that we would look at how we would set this up properly. Because this is the sort of thing you want to avoid. This is almost unreadable. No one can tell what's going on here. And it should be avoided at all costs. So I'm going to demonstrate tabs in Adobe Illustrator, but the principles apply to almost every other application, including Microsoft Word. So just remember like the basics here, and then we will also later look at how to do this in InDesign, potentially Microsoft Word. I don't know how relevant that would be, but I just want to show how things translate across different applications. So diving right into it, let's start a new Illustrator file. And this is my resume. I'm going to introduce this in a bit. This is the assignment coming up for this lab, is to create your own resume, which makes heavy use of indents and tabs and style sheets. So we'll be able to put this into practice for something that will hopefully be relevant and really help you as you go out and explore your career. So we'll start a new document. I'm going to make this a print document because tabs, typically are for something printed, but it really wouldn't matter if this was something that was destined for a PDF or for the screen as well. So I'm just going to make a landscape. Go ahead and throw this one in inches, and go ahead and use CMYK. Like I've said before, this could also be RGB. This is just going to be black and white, so it really doesn't matter that much. So not something we need to stress about today. Today is focused more on using the tabs feature and really understanding how tabs work. All right, so I have copied the text here, which is a hot mess, but we will sort it out. So the first thing to know is that tabs tend to be a little easier with an area text box. They should still work with point text. But in general, if you're using tabs, it's because you have a block of text that's fairly large. So I'm going to just make a big block of text, paste in what we have here. I'm going to pick just a slightly easier font. I think we'll just go Helvetica for this guy. And we will start to look at what tabs do. So right now, you can see this is all just one column. I'm going to turn on a feature of Illustrator. It's also in a lot of other apps where you can see like the invisible characters, and tabs are inherently invisible. So we will do type, show hidden characters. Sometimes I believe in InDesign it's called show invisibles. There's a lot of different terms for it. But when we do that, you can see now it's showing me the paragraph symbol here and dots for spaces. And showing the hidden characters can be really helpful if there are times you're working with a design and something's going on and you just don't understand why something might not be aligning, there are times when strange invisible codes can sort of get plopped into your design. So turning on the invisible characters really helps you troubleshoot that. And in this case, it will help us see where these tabs actually exist. So what I'm going to do first is just get the days of the week organized onto one line. So I can already see this is kind of a hot mess because of the way the text was scanned in. I used my phone to scan it. So I'm just going to paste in all the days of the week as such. Okay, so right now I'm just going to focus on these days. So I'm going to just add some space there. Okay, so you can see this little double arrow caret icon here. That is showing what tabs are. And by default, tabs are kind of like every ½ inch roughly. And by default, tabs are useless. You always want to go in and change where the tabs are. And one thing to avoid, a lot of people will say, okay, I'll use tabs, that helps me align things and it's very precise, but they hit multiple tabs in between to sort of space it out. That's not the right way to do that. You only want one tab in between each in between each piece of data. So if you think of it as you're essentially making columns like a spreadsheet here. So I'm going to undo that to get back to just one tab. So now what we do is we go to type, and I have picked the wrong one. We're going to say window, type, and tabs. Command-Shift-T is the shortcut. And so by default, what this is doing, it's giving me a ruler that stretches the entire length of the document. And in Illustrator, it tries to align it with the text box. So you can see right here, it's trying to align it on the left edge. So the actual types of tabs are these little icons here. And what these do is give you options as for how those tabs are aligned. So in this case, we want to use the most basic tab, which is just a left indent tab. And what I'm going to do is put these about every 1.5 inches. And so you can see as soon as I click that, because I have tabs typed in, it's going to start moving these. If I could click the right spot. All right, there we go. So that's a really quick introduction to how tabs work. But you can see how powerful that is. Like right away, I've already got these things aligned in a pretty nice series of columns. If I turn off the invisible characters, you can see that those are nicely spaced. There are some, visual things like Wednesday's a bit longer of a word, so it leaves less space here. But once we get all the data in, it will start looking like a regular column. So I'm going to go back to this original image just to sort of study what the heck it was they were trying to say. And so I can see that this first row, they wanted to say Tucker, Nancy, Nancy Lee, and Nancy Lee gone on Friday. And so I can see what's happening here is this is kind of wrapped around, and now it makes sense why it looks like some of these names are in the Tuesday column, but they're really for Friday. So going back here, what I can do is, again, hit tabs in between. And here's a neat little trick in Illustrator. So because I only applied the tab settings to this line, they don't automatically carry to any other lines. And that's important to remember. It's something we'll look at with style sheets here in a minute, that you can actually embed the tab information into the style sheets. But what I can do is I can select this line, take the eyedropper tool, and actually click this. And you can see it copies everything. It copies the tab format, the font style. Well, they were all the same font anyway, but it would have copied the font style. And it just helps, it's a quick way to be able to apply certain text styles. So the eyedropper in Illustrator, not just for colors, it's for pretty much any attribute you want to carry over. So I took just a moment there to clean up the text and get it all formatted so we can look at applying the tabs versus you watching me just type all that out. So I wanted to show here how we can take this top line that we've already done some preliminary formatting with the tabs, and we can use this as a way to create the basis of a style sheet. And then that style sheet will let us apply those tabs to the other lines a little bit more easily. And then if we want to tweak the tabs, it'll be so much easier to update once it's defined in a paragraph style. So what we want to do first is get out your styles palette, paragraph styles, and that's under Window, Type, and Paragraph Styles. And then if we just select this line here, you don't even have to select the whole thing, but what you can do is go up here. I'm going to delete a style that I just made and click the New Style button. And what it will do is whatever you have selected, it's going to use that as kind of the basis of what this new style will start. You always are going to tweak it later, but it's just a way to get some of those core attributes in if you've already done some work setting up the style. So do that, and you can notice it's not applied automatically. So I do have to click this paragraph style, and then now I'm going to double click it to edit the attributes of that. So I'm just going to call this line tabs. Not a great name, but call it something. You can see our basic character formats have already come in. You have Helvetica as the font. The tabs area down here, you can see it's when we set them at 1.5 inches, it's got that embedded. Unfortunately, the window is a little small. This is kind of a shortcoming, in my opinion, of some of the Adobe apps. But there's a little scroll thing here that you can move across. So not the most elegant interface to set the tabs, but it works. So you can, just to double check, we've got them set every 1.5 inches. And I'll go back over what the leader is and some of the other align attributes for these other types of tabs in just a moment. So I'm gonna hit OK there. And then what I want to do, because that's only applied now to this first line, if I click here, you can see the second line still is just the normal paragraph style. That's just the default setting. So what I'm going to do is select the entire block of text and convert it to a line of tabs. And you see how quickly that just lined everything up because it brought all those tab settings into the entire, or all these text that was selected, I should say. And now the cool part is I'm going to turn off the invisible so it's a little easier to see. So I'm going to take out the line space here. We'll look at how to do that properly in just a moment. But the great part is now that I have that, I don't even have to have this selected. I can just go in, double click the style option, and let's say I just want to change the font, to Helvetica Bold. Boom. Or put that back to light for now. If I want the tabs, if I'm like, well, those are maybe great, but I want them a little closer, I want them 1.25 inches. So what I can do is click on a tab and drag it. And you can see how that number in the X attribute changes down below. What I can do is type in something really precise there so I don't have to guess in the interface. I can just say 1.25. It actually gives you an option to repeat tabs at that. So let's see if that actually works. Boom, yep. So you can see it added another one at 2.5, another one at 3.75, and another one at 5. So using the repeat, if you know you want them to be a consistent measurement across your document, that's a great shortcut there. What I'm going to show you next is if we change those. So I'm going to clear all the tabs, and it's going to bring all this back to kind of a hot mess like that, and just show you what some of these other alignments do. So it's pretty obvious, really, but so if you wanted something right aligned, you can do this. I'll move these out to 1.5 inches because it will just be easier to see, and I'll repeat those. So you can see, all of these are now right aligned. This might be something, maybe you need it for, like some financial data or like a chapter list where you want all of the subjects to be right aligned. Center, same thing. So I'm going to clear all again. It really depends on your, your needs for your design. Sometimes, there's just certain things you need in order to, make your design most effective. Because the whole goal is to communicate. It's to make sure your data is readable and understandable by the audience. So that's all center aligned. And then the one that's sometimes a bit hard to understand is the decimal alignment. So in this case, we don't have decimals, but I want to show you just how it works. So I'm going to clear everything. I'm going to set a decimal align tab at 1.5 inches. Oops. Get back in there. So this decimal align tab, it says align on. And so usually it uses a period. So think of if you have a column of numbers and you want all the decimals to line up. But really you can type anything in here. So I'm just going to type, looks like the letter E is fairly common. I'm going to type the letter E. And you can see that this is actually lining up all this text on the letter E, which is a little weird, but it works. Next, I want to show you the leaders. So I'm going to go back to just making left align tabs. We'll do them in 1.5 inches again. Oops, and I made a mistake there. I still had the decimal align tab selected. So I will do a left align for sure, repeat that. Okay, now we're back kind of to square one. So imagine you had a table of contents or something where you want, dots to go from one column to the next. Natural instinct is just to hit the period key and try line it up. Really messy way to do it, kind of unprofessional. The smart way to do it, select your tab, and in your leader, just type the dot. And you can see right there, we add dots between. So I'm going to clear all so that I can do that as a repeating tab. And now we can see how those dots automatically go through. But that leader can actually be anything. If you wanted it to be underscores, I've seen that done where if you want like a, fill in the blank, or if you're creating a form that someone has to actually fill out by hand, you might use underscores. You can see there how that works. There's, could be something interesting, like maybe you are using an X for some reason, and that puts X's in between. So whatever you type in that leader field is going to fill up that tab space. And there could be some potentially creative uses for that. But for the most part, it's going to be just a period in there to do that sort of like trail of dots to make a table of contents really easy to read. So I'm going to clear all that. I'm just going to set it back to a regular old left align tab with no leader every 1.5 inches. And hit OK. And so now that's really tabs in a nutshell. Like if you can understand that, it's going to make your life so much easier. Anytime you have data like this, make sure to use tabs. If you're hitting spaces, it might seem like it's saving time, but what happens is it could look fine on screen. When it's actually printed, those spaces tend to have different widths. They do different things. And so your text is going to get all ragged and funky and not look good, basically. So use tabs. Let's jump back into style sheets now for things like, we probably want this to be bold, like a header. So I'm going to hit, while it's selected, hit create a new tab again, or sorry, new style sheet. I can't talk today. Double click on it. We'll call this header, for lack of a better term. And in this one, we're just going to make the font Helvetica bold and hit OK. And then now that we have one style set up for that, we can don't even have to select text. You can just put the cursor in any of these lines and click on the header. And now you can see it's all looking a lot better, a lot more readable than it was initially. What we want to do next is maybe add a little space in between. So the great thing is now that I have the styles set up and I've sort of applied those styles to the types of text, what I can do is just double click these now, and let's say I want to add a little space. I can go to Indents and Spacing. I can say space after. Let's maybe add a couple points. And you see how that automatically adds that space. I don't have to hit a return. That can, if you're adding extra lines, that can get a little funky because it's hard to know where you put the lines and where you've forgotten them. But by adding space, it's making this text a lot more professional and a lot easier to manage. So if you can imagine you're doing a book that's 100 pages, style sheets become essential in that context, because without style sheets, you're going to amplify the amount of time you need to spend typesetting things, an order of magnitude greater than you need to. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to hit OK there. I'm going to make another style for just the days of the week. So in this one, I'm going to show again how if I want to just play with the styles like out here outside of the paragraph style dialog, what I can do is just change this. So let's maybe make this italic. What else could we do there? Maybe let's change the case. We'll do change case to uppercase. Not that this is necessarily the greatest design, but I'm just showing what's there. Make that smaller, and actually let's make this bold oblique. So now that I have that defined, you could copy this, paste it to the others, but smarter way, let's make a style. Let's call the style something appropriate, and then we'll apply that to the other lines. So I'm going to hit new style again while this is selected, so it will keep all of those attributes. Now if I double click this, I can call this days, I don't know why I'm using O, days of the week, and just double check that we have our Helvetica bold oblique. It should carry the tabs through automatically. And for indents and spacing, I think I want to add just a little bit of space after that one, just to give it a little breathing room. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. So we'll hit OK there. So now the great thing is I just have to click in any of these, hit days of the week style, and it automatically applies all of those same settings. Except for, I'm noticing it forgot one. It forgot the all caps. So let's try to figure that out. So, and this is when I talk about in this class, like overcoming problems or difficulties that arise. Things like this happen all the time. I'm not sure why it didn't want to keep the all caps attribute, but now that I have the style set up, it's going to be a little bit easier to figure out. So let's work through this together. You can kind of see how I troubleshoot things in real time. So if we go into days of the week, we can go to basic character formats. And yeah, for whatever reason, it didn't pick up that I want this to be all caps. But all I have to do is change that menu, and boom, there we go. What else could we do? Let's see. We could change color. That might be something interesting. Maybe we go into basic character formats, character color, and I don't know, let's make this something really amazing like cyan. Hit OK. But you can see how once you have these styles, it makes formatting everything so much easier. So I really recommend, even if you don't know what the styles are going to look like just yet, go into your document, make a habit of creating styles right away, applying those styles to the types of content. You're sort of tagging the content with the type that it is. And then from there, then work on the design, because you can see the whole thing kind of magically come together really quickly. And when we start looking at InDesign for style sheets, there are like a billion more options in InDesign. You can do things like control if a paragraph is going to break from one page to the other. You can say I want it to keep this many lines on this page and put this many lines on the other page. InDesign has just kind of the ultimate style sheet ability. So last thing I wanted to talk about is indents, which really relates to tabs, but it can be a little tricky to figure out. Indent is kind of like one tab that's just in the very left side, well, I guess left and right side of your text. But they function in a similar way to tabs. So let's go into, actually we're gonna make a style sheet for, let's see, for the names here, just to make sure we've got something defined. Okay. So now when we look at these, what we can do, I'm just going to imagine perhaps we want, I don't know, the names and the days of the week just to be inset just a little bit so that the header here is a little bit further left. So what I can do is go into the names, double click that again, go into the tab setting, and the indents are right here. Well, we have indents and spacing where we can say left indent and first line indent. It's also visually here in the tabs. So it's kind of hard to see, but it's this little triangle here to the left. So what I'll do is I'll just move this over. Oops, if I can actually manage to grab it. There we go. So you see I'm sliding and it kind of splits that triangle in two. But you see how now that I've grabbed the correct triangle, it's putting it in the right spot. So I'm going to move that in just like a 1/4 inch. And again, this isn't looking great because now the tabs are breaking, but just to show you what that indent is all about. But it's sort of important to realize that what you're changing here, this corresponds to what's in this indents and spacing area. So you can see here we can move that. First line indent is, let's say you have a paragraph of text. Actually, let's jump out of here because I'm giving you a really bad example of this. This sort of data doesn't lend itself to indents very well. So I'm just going to cancel that. We're just going to make a new paragraph. Oops, I'm going to make this box a little bit shorter. There we go. So this fills with placeholder text. So let's make this a new style. We'll just call this Indents Example. And in here, what I can do is, this will illustrate this a lot better. So the first line indent is like old school novels, right? It indents the first paragraph. Everything runs right together. I'm going to make this not oblique because it's kind of hard to look at. And then maybe give it a little bit more leading. Oops. So you can see that with the indents, first line indent is just literally the first line of the paragraph is how much that gets indented. The left indent is the entire left margin, like that. And then the right indent, same thing. So this can be handy if you're creating a long document, and let's say you want, you have like a call out area in the text where you want to just offset it just a little bit from the other text to emphasize a point. That's what these indents are for. Or perhaps it's something you have an illustration in the margin or something like that. These indents help with that, to be able to just sort of push your text around in a global way without having, the worst way to do it is to make separate text boxes and shrink those in. Ideally, in a long form document, you want to have as few text boxes as possible, like maybe just the columns, but everything flows and everything is linked together. So I'm going to undo that here. Oops, that was left. I wanted that to be first line. So this is looking more like normal text. And then just to, again, emphasize, you can also do the space after like that, which prevents you from having to hit returns manually for everything, which can get a little bit messy. And then space before, essentially the same thing, it just happens before the paragraph. So sometimes you want this, if you have subheaders or different, sorts of things lining up with a paragraph, these space before and after can help you like tweak those design parameters. So yeah, so that really is kind of indents, tabs, and style sheets in a nutshell. As we launch into the resume project, it'll make a lot more sense when you're applying it to your own information and really trying to figure out how to format your own resume. But I guarantee you this is something, especially if you get into longer form documents or just working with any amount of text, doing it properly with tabs and indents and style sheets right from the beginning will save you so much time, save you a lot of hassles and a lot of headaches. So with that, we will launch into making a resume.